I'd like to call to order the annual town meeting of the town of Sevastopol. Today, Tuesday, April 19th at 6 p.m. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm sorry. All right, we'll start off this evening because some of these wonderful folks that are with us tonight don't necessarily know all of us, so I'll start on the end with our clerk treasurer.
Amy Flock, Clerk Treasurer, 4818 County Road P.
Mark Kane, Town Supervisor, 4675 Matthew Road.
Jeannie Vogel, Town Supervisor, 4693 Windermere Drive.
Dan Wolfel, Park Road, Town Chairman.
Linda Waite, 5075 Bluff Court, Supervisor.
Derek Daniel, 4832 County Road P, Town Supervisor.
Good. Tom, how about we start with you, if you would. We'll go down through and introduce everyone.
My name is Tom Pollock, and I live on 3931 Whitefish Bay Road, east of Valley.
I'm Christine Grutzmacher. I'm his wife, and I live in the same house.
And I'm Dale Vogel, and I live in the same house as the supervisor.
I'm Keith Muchler, 6451 Whitefish Bay Road.
Tim Denham, Survey Fire Chief.
I'm Hugh Settle, and I live at 3986 Glitter Drive, and I am the District 14 County Board Supervisor serving eastern Sevastopol. And I just would like to give a quick shout out and a thank you to Biz Verley, who retired after 22 years serving the constituents in this area. And I hope I can live up all the great work and service that he did in serving our community.
I'm Neil Zachariason. I live at 4471 Glidden Drive.
George Zachariason, 6290 Bluffport Trail.
I'm Whitney Everard, 5687 Townland Road.
Ashley Stotts, 5035 Clark Lake Road, and I'm the Sevastopol EMR crew chief.
Lotta Bio, 444 West Bay Shore Drive.
Sharon Mutual, 6451 Whitefish Bay Road. I was telling Linda that a few years ago, Dan made a comment that people should get more involved and be there more often for Sevastopol town meetings, and so that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you.
Mary Monster, 6427 Whitefish Bay Road.
Brenda Lang, 6417 Whitefish Bay Road.
Jeff Lang, 6417 Whitefish Bay Road.
All right. And our two videographers.
Derek Denise, North Country Road.
Larry Chapman, Glidden Drive.
Great. Well, thank you, and we're glad that you joined us this evening. Our first order of business, we'll follow an agenda, even though it's an informal meeting, but just something to guide us along, would be to administer the oath of office to the two most recently re-elected officials on the town board. And with that, I would rely upon my clerk treasurer.
All right, so I need Amy Vogel and Derek Daniel to stand up and raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, and then state your name.
I, Jeannie Vogel.
Having been elected to the office of Town Board Supervisor,
Having been elected to the office of Town Board Supervisor,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
discharge duties of said office to the best of my ability.
discharge duties of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Thank you.
You're here. All right. Thank you. It is not easy to find people that want to step up and make the investment in time that it takes to do this job. So I'm very grateful for both people running again, as I am for Mr. Zettel.
as he's been a great contributor to the town and will do a great job for the county and for all of us as well. So with that, next order of business would be to approve the minutes from the annual town meeting of April 20, 2021. And at these meetings, someone from the floor can make a motion if they would like.
I'll make a motion to approve it with one slight change,
Oh,
Chairman.
no change.
It looks like I was at the meeting twice.
Oh.
So apparently either I'm calling myself or I'm twice as important as I think I am. So maybe you can fix that. Otherwise, I move to accept it.
All right, we have a motion by Laddie with a brief modification.
I'll second.
Second by Dale. All those in favor, and you all may vote, please indicate your approval by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, carried. This is great. This whole meeting's moving right along. All right, if you've seen the agenda, we have a few things this evening. I'll just recap briefly. Presentation of the review of our audited financial reports. This will be done via videotape from our auditor. In some years, we're lucky enough to have the individual here, but since all the towns have their annual meetings on the same nights, there's not enough of those people to go around. And we started doing this, I think, last year. 2 years, and it worked out quite well. She'll take us through the annual report, and if there's any questions thereafter, she's available by phone. We can pick up the phone call and get any questions answered. After that, we will have Tim Detman, our fire chief, who represents and covers the town. We'll do his annual fire report. Ashley, who introduced herself as the crew chief for the Sevastopol EMRs, will give us a review of the EMR activity. Then we will go to a broadband overview. There's been a lot of conversation in the county regarding broadband. Almost all of the towns are working towards some form of resolution to improve broadband for their citizens, and we're going to take you through where we stand with that project and look for a little input. Lastly, I'll finish up with just a review of some of the highlights that the town board achieved in the last year. Then we go on to any future needs, projects, or discussions that you'd like to bring up, any electors' concerns or resolutions, and then basically we'll have a few announcements and we will adjourn. So with that, why don't we start with the audited financial report. Oh,
Oops.
maybe she's here.
Over. Go over.
Oh, good. Up, Ross. So we all chill out. All right, everybody grab a sheet off the easel for a painting lesson. This is time to chill. Bob Ross.
Oh, this is very early, Bob Ross. It's not even him. Here's your lesson. Well, that's,
Where did it go?
there she is.
All right. She's
How's the
back.
sound? This is just blue teeth.
Except she's not speaking.
Okay. That's your mic? It's your mic, maybe?
I don't think it
I
is.
think it's right here.
Okay.
Start it over again.
Worked flawlessly last. Getting there.
Oops. Maybe if we turn off all of our mics.
Okay.
rather than having them a little bit more buried in the paragraphs. But essentially, none of the information that's in the opinion. Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth McMasters. I am a director in our Green Bay office for Clifton Larson Allen. I was a member of the audit team that worked on the town of Sevastopol's audit. So today I'm going to take some time to go through the financial statements. I'll point out any changes that have occurred since the last year, kind of give a refresher just on how the financial statements work, point out some of the highlights and some of the information that might be interesting to a user of the financial statements. So I'll be starting out with the big audit report, the full report, starting on page 1. This is our audit opinion. One thing that changed since the previous year, there were some auditing standards that were released. So the format of the opinion has changed slightly. In my opinion, it's for the better. I think most people would agree. It's a little bit more transparent and specifically details out some of the items that somebody would be interested in rather than having them a little bit more buried in the paragraphs. But essentially, none of the information that's in the opinion changed a whole lot rather than those added pieces being in there. So on page 1, the whole goal of our audit is the opinion. This is us, letting the town know that we believe these financial statements are materially correct. You can see this in the second paragraph on page 1. Right away, it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So what does that mean when we say material respects? We're not going to necessarily find every single error that's within here, but take a risk-based approach. We use levels of materiality to determine, what might skew these financial statements. So we might not find an error that, might be $100 or even $1,000, but we've verified that the financial statements are materially correct and that users can rely on these statements in order to make decisions. So essentially what that means is the town received a clean audit opinion is what we like to say. Towards the bottom of page 1, this discusses the responsibilities of management for the financial statements. Yes, we go ahead and do the audit of the financial statements, but management is ultimately responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. The financial statements are only as good as what we're given, and we'll make sure that what we're given is correct. But, if there was anything omitted or, there's an error in interpretation along the way, something like that, sometimes those types of things happen. So ultimately, we just want to make sure that, management, and the board, that there's a responsibility there that we want to make sure is known. Moving on to page 2, this is where you'll start to see some of those differences. So previously, the opinion used to be at the top of this page. As I just pointed out, it's now, the second paragraph. And then about middle of the way down this page, you'll see there's now bullet points with some of the items that are specifically highlighted that are done during the audit, such as the auditors, we exercise professional judgment and, maintain professional skepticism. So if we see something that's odd or whatever, we use our professional skepticism and make sure that we're following up on those items and that we don't just overlook it. So we do that to the best of our ability. Second bullet point, we identify and assess the risks of material misstatement. So, depending on what's going on at the town, the operations, anything that's new, we look at all of this and try to pull it all together to perform our audit and to try to identify where our highest risk areas may be and to make sure that those areas are correct. We obtain an understanding of the internal control procedures, and then we design our audit based on that understanding. So although, internal controls might not always be perfect depending on the size, there's different procedures that we perform depending on if there is one person at a town, such as the town of Sevastopol, versus when we're starting to go to some of our larger audits where there's 10 people on an accounting staff or something like that. So, our audit procedures are different depending on what's going on. We also take a look at the accounting policies that are in place and make sure that the financial statements are, following GAAP, which is the basis that these are around. And make sure that any accounting policies, aren't doing something that they're not meant to do. The last bullet point, we also make sure that, whether there are conditions or events considered in the aggregate that raise substantial doubt about the town's ability to continue as a going concern. Now, I read that verbatim because it's a kind of a packed sentence, but really what it means is that if there's anything that we're seeing that, these specific trends are occurring, or, things are happening that aren't quite right, that eventually it's going to lead to the town not being able to continue, that it wouldn't exist anymore because there's not cash on hand, or there's not enough of a reserve balance. We take a look at all of those items to make sure that the town is going to be able to sustain itself, and we can raise any of those concerns that we may have. And I'll kind of point out in the next areas what those indicators are that we try to look at and make sure that there's adequate planning for those items. So, as I said, these are some of those changes that are now a little bit more forefront. These aren't any different than what we've done in the past. We've always done these as part of the audit. However, it's more spelled out in this opinion than what it has been in the past. And it was kind of buried in paragraphs, more or less. The next sections of the opinion are just standard language, how, we've done the audit for several years now. There's prior year stuff in our report. We expressed an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion in previous years. So the financial statements really begin on page 5. And just as a reminder, page 5 is the start of the full accrual basis. So these are not, the financial statements, there's two pieces in here really. The ones that are on page 5 are not the ones that are used on the day-to-day decision making. These are on full accrual, and this is something that we do as an audit service for the town, is we convert the town's books into this method because it is a required reporting piece. So the differences are, though, is that when the town is doing the day-to-day operations, they're recording everything as a revenue or as an expenditure. They don't record anything on a long-term basis. So the easiest examples to give is that, if the town purchases a truck, that's going to be an expenditure that they see on their books, pay out on an invoice. In this method of accounting, those items are recorded on a long-term basis because a truck is going to benefit a town over, maybe 10 years, maybe not quite, depending on the use of it. So those items sit on the balance sheet and they're depreciated over their life. The town no longer has any debt, but if the town did have debt, it would show the balance that's still remaining to be paid on that long-term obligation. So those are some of the differences. There's a lot of items that can qualify into this statement but not be shown on the town's books. A couple of other ones that I'll point out. If you look up in the asset section, there is a net pension asset. As I've discussed in previous meetings, that is part of the WRS, the Wisconsin Retirement System. That plan can sometimes, it's basically a fully funded plan. It can hover between slightly overfunded or slightly underfunded, depending just on market rates. In the last year, it continued to be a little overfunded, resulting in a pension asset. There have been previous years where it has, dipped down and been a liability on the books. But you can see for 2020 and 2021, it was a pension asset for both of those years. It'll be kind of interesting to see as the market rates are changing in 2022, where that level ends up being at the end of 2022. So that's one item that, the town doesn't see that in their day-to-day, when they're looking at the budget to actual statements at the board meetings. But that's something that we do as part of the audit to convert. And when I mention that pension asset, some people think, oh, that could be cash in the bank that we're ready to spend. And this is the accounting basis that it's required to be recorded in these statements. It doesn't necessarily result in cash in the bank. If the plan were to fail, this is what, or I shouldn't say fail, if the plan were to stop existence now. This is what would be potentially paid out, I guess you could look at it. But that has a very, very small chance of happening. I wouldn't ever think it would happen, to be honest. I think for states like Wisconsin, or not Wisconsin, Michigan and Illinois, where they have a severely underfunded plan and they have a significant liability on their books. And if something were to happen to that plan, all of those participating entities would have to potentially look at paying out in order to even keep the people that are owed those benefits, what they were promised. So for Wisconsin, it really doesn't make too much of a difference. But I also want to make sure that people understand that it's not cash in the bank that can be used to, support the town's operations. Another item that's kind of note on this statement, you'll see in the liabilities section, there's a new line this year that's called unearned revenues, and that is relating to the unspent ARPA funds. So the reason that it shows up on this statement is because not all of the requirements have been met in order to recognize it as revenue. And what I mean by that is the town hasn't identified, we're going to, spend it on this, and you have an invoice to show that you spent it. So as soon as you've spent it, it will be recognized as revenue and offset against any expenditures that you're showing on your income statement. So basically it's a temporary placeholder until all of the requirements have been met, and it'll sit there until 2022 or whenever those expenditures occur based on the town's plans. So I believe there was a little bit more than 132,000 that was received. I want to say it was about 139,000 in the first tranche of payments from the feds. And this amount, the difference is because there was a piece that was actually spent during the year, based on our discussions with Amy during the audit. So we'll continue to watch that year to year. And make sure that however much is spent is actually recognized as those invoices occurring. So page 6 is like the income statement. This is showing the revenues and expenditures for the year based on that full accrual basis. Truth be told, this statement isn't used too often just because it's not as useful when you're not comparing it to the budget. Page 7, this is the start of the statements that can be a little bit more useful to especially the board and any users of the financial statements, because it's showing everything on the basis that you're used to seeing, where everything is a revenue or an expense and you can see the budget to actual. The budget information isn't on this page, but I will point that out in future pages. A couple items of note on here. In the assets section, you'll notice there's a new line that's titled prepaid items. This is new this year because it only related to the timing of the fire protection agreement payment that occurred. So there was $94,000 that was paid for the 2022 fire protection agreement, but it was paid in 2021 versus in 2022. So we don't want to show that as an expense on 2021's books when it should be recognized in 2022. This is a common item. It pops up year to year depending on just timing of, a lot of times you have a due date of 1/1 of 2022, so you've got to get it paid, but it just doesn't relate to the current year as an expenditure. So by showing it as a prepaid item, it's kind of putting that placeholder there to show, oh, we've already paid out the cash, but we don't want to recognize the expense, and the expense will be recognized in 2022. Like I said, it's a common item. It can pop up from time to time, and we just want to make sure that that income statement is accurately reflecting the expenses that relate to the current year under audit. So that prepaid item of 94,000, it's shown up in the assets section, but then it's also shown down in the fund balance section towards the bottom. And again, that's just indicating that, of the fund balance that the town has, a piece of that is already spent towards that fire protection. So we don't want it to look like your reserves have more of an ability than what they do. So that category of non-spendable is to show that those funds are already set aside, and they're not available to be spent on other items, if that makes sense. Um, Going through the fund balance categories, I'll show you the notes a little bit later, and I can kind of touch on where these balances are falling. So restricted, not much change. That's pretty consistent. Committed, those would be the items that are committed by board action. Not much change there. There's the assigned line, which those are items that are assigned for the subsequent year budget, which that's pretty consistent to the previous year's items that are carrying over to 2022. And then unassigned, which is anything that doesn't hit one of the categories that we just talked about, and that's kind of your rainy day fund. The rainy day fund is something that we look at, and you always want to make sure that you have something in there in order to, have like a float available with timing of any type of state aids or property taxes, since those come in such large chunks at specific points in the year. So that rainy day fund is kind of a metric that can be used to make sure that the town is going to be able to sustain their operations the rest of the year while they're waiting on those big chunks of revenue to come in, even though the expenditures are pretty consistent year round. You're always going to have payroll, you're always going to have, maintenance type items, or normal operating items that are going to be consistent throughout the year. So usually, and I believe the town's fund balance policy is that about 15% should be set aside in that unassigned category. So if I just compare the unassigned, as of 2021 to what the 2021 general fund expenditures, the town is about 14%. So it's right in line with that 15%. The other item that the town has working in their favor is that they do have such a large balance in that assigned category. So what that signals is that there are items that the board is aware of that they anticipate spending in a future year. So essentially there's planning in place. They're aware of some of those capital items that that are bigger expenditures that they want to make sure they have funds set aside for, and same thing with the committed balances. So when you take the unassigned plus all the planning that you have in place, I don't necessarily have any concerns that they're starting to, that unassigned fund balance dipped a little bit under what the policy is. And then going forward, the town has plans in place to make sure that they have funding set aside for some of those big ticket items that might be coming down the pipeline, 5 to 10 years out. So as long as the town is managing, that they're aware of that, those are all really good financial indicators that I would not have any concerns over that, staying right at that 15%. Being aware of those values, if they know that there's things coming down that you want that unassigned fund balance to be in that 20, 25%, 30% range, that can be something that, places mess with, or I shouldn't say mess with, they make sure it's appropriate in order to make sure that they're meeting those needs in those future years. So some places are more comfortable with a 25% value. Some are good at 15%. Some they might go down to 10%, but then they know they're going to pop up to 20% in a future year. So as long as the town is monitoring that, that's all we're concerned about. Page 8, this is a reconciliation that shows those items that we use that we do as part of our audit services, to convert the town's books into that full accrual basis that I was kind of talking about. So like I mentioned, those capital asset items, anything that's going to extend the life of an item over a year, those are showing up. You can see there's 2.6 million in that pension asset and the related deferred outflows and inflows relating to that pension, just because of the timing of the contribution payments with that plan. This is how we are reconciling to those front statements. Page 9, this is the income statement that would be on the basis that the town is most used to seeing. However, this is a very high level version of it, and I think it's more useful to use the budget to actual statements that I'll be showing you in later pages. Overall, though, one of the financial indicators that I always like to point out is the net change in fund balance towards the bottom of the page. You can see overall the revenues were greater than the expenditures by 76,000. So, one concern is that if, the town is consistently negative, that would be something that we would, want the town to be aware of, just because that can, you're chipping away at your rainy day fund and using up those funds. However, that's not what Sevastopol has going on. You can see they actually are consistently have more revenues than expenditures, and they're kind of putting those reserves away slowly but surely. So that's a good sign. There's not necessarily a right or wrong, as long as that planning is in place, that, if you need to be setting aside more funds for a bigger project, that's something to be aware of. Or, if everything is pretty stagnant and, you're not necessarily gearing up for anything major, then maybe, just keeping that balance positive is all you're looking for. So all things to consider. Page 10, this is to show the income statement effects of those conversions that we do. So any revenues and expenditures with current year activity. One item, for example, you can see there's 17,000. That is for items that were added during the year to capital assets. I'll point out later, I want to say that there was a little bit of money spent for like a pickleball type court, there was also a lawnmower that was purchased during the year. So that's showing the expenditures that were, in those fund financial statements. And hey, we're not going to show them as expenditures anymore. We're going to convert them to a capital asset. So, that's just one example. Same thing, recognizing depreciation expense on all those items that are being capitalized over how many years, that this is the current year's depreciation expense. So a little bit about that statement. Page 11, this is the start of the budget information. However, this is a little bit of a higher level. You can see overall that net change in fund balance, there's still an increase. There was a little less in revenues than what was budgeted, but I do know that within that budget, those carryover funds that are going into 2022 are also showing as a piece in there. So that's nothing of concern there. And then overall, the expenditures were under what was budgeted. So page 12, I'll just go over this as a refresher. This is what's called the custodial fund. So this was a new standard that was put in place last year in 2020's statements. So this is continuing on, no major changes since then. However, this statement is showing all of the amounts that are held for other entities relating to the property tax roll as of 12/31/21. So if you think of the advanced tax collections that are collected in December of 2021, these are the amounts that are being held, and any amounts that haven't been received relating to that 2021 tax roll. So these are the amounts that were remitted to counties, school district, or to the county school district, in January and February of 2022. So just a point in time to show what's being held for those other entities. And then on page 13, same thing with just an income statement to show what's going in and out for those entities. Starting on page 14 are the notes to the financial statements. This is a good high level explanation of kind of how the financial statements work. No major changes in here. Skipping to page 22, this is a detailed information on some of the specific information that's in the notes. So you'll see on 22, it kind of talks about how much is in cash and investments and what types of cash and investments, such as, the town has investments in LGIP, which is a very, very common item that we see across Wisconsin. And if there were anything like sensitive that the town had in cash and investments, it would be detailed out in this section. Some of the things that there might be like mutual funds or anything like that, not very common with municipalities of this size. Most common thing that we see is our investments in the Wisconsin LGIP. So any types of risks are detailed out within here. So at the bottom of page 23, you'll notice that the town had 2.1 million of deposits with financial institutions. One item that we always look at during the audit is how much of those balances are covered in case an institution were to fail, and would the town be out that money, or essentially is the money collateralized. So one of the required disclosures that we have to have with the audit is to indicate how much of that money is collateralized or is covered through insurance with the FDIC insurance, and there's a state guarantee fund. Um, so you can see at the bottom of page 23, so 2.1 million of the town's deposits were in excess of those federal and state depository insurance limits. And none of that amount was collateralized. However, that balance is very, very large at year end only because of those advanced tax collections that are actually remitted to the county and school district at in January and February of 2022. So, and we put that right into here. So, although that balance is higher than what those FDIC insurance limits are, that isn't of concern. This is very normal, and that dollar amount is just a point in time. If we had calculated the exact same dollar amount, as of the end of March, I would be willing to bet that the town is probably right within those insurance limits, that there wouldn't be a concern. So, nothing that I'd be concerned about, and very, very common across many of our municipalities. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that the town go out and get collateral regarding those bank deposits. And if there ever were operations that those cash balances are building and it's a little more consistent during the year, that might be something to consider. But oftentimes the bankers are kind of aware of that, and that's often a discussion that they'll have depending on the limits that they're seeing. On page 25 is the capital asset footnote, as I kind of discussed earlier. So you can see there was that $4,500 placed into construction work in progress, as I think there was some preliminary work and assessments done on that potential pickleball court. And then a little bit of activity in that machinery and equipment for the lawnmower that was purchased during the year. At the bottom of page 25, this is indicating the legal margin for new debt. So at this point in time, based on the equalized value of the town, the debt limit would be, over 44 million. So the town has plenty of debt capacity if there ever was a major project that, the town needed to take out debt for it. So plenty of capacity. Sometimes we run into problems where places are, reaching their debt limit, but that's not a concern for this town. Page 26 is the start of the disclosures that are related to the town's participation in the WRS plan with that net pension asset that I was discussing earlier. When the standard was put in place that required this information to be disclosed, it added a significant amount of pages to our report. If you want something to fall asleep to, I highly suggest reading this word for word. There's a lot of good information in there, but it's all just required disclosures because of that pension asset. And that goes all the way through page 31. So big chunk of the report. On page 32, this is the discussion on those equity balances that I was kind of pointing out earlier. So you can see at the top, it has that non-spendable for that fire protection service, restricted fund balance for the emergency medical responder donations of that $13,000, committed fund balance, which is done by board action of the town. So you can see there's money's being set aside for revaluation, that broadband, and then assigned fund balance. Those are the amounts that are assigned for subsequent year's budget. So as I kind of mentioned before, when you take with that unassigned fund balance plus all the planning that the town has in place, it seems like the town is definitely very aware of, what their intentions are and what they plan on spending money for, which are all very good financial indicators. Top of page 33 is that disclosure on the town's minimum fund balance policy with that 15%. So you can see that with that unassigned fund balance of 174,000, it's about 10 grand under what the policy would say, but as I mentioned before, no major concerns with that, as long as it's right in that vicinity and that there's plans in place. The next pages relate to, this is additional required supplementary information, also relating to the WRS plan, also another required disclosure. And then we get into the supplementary information, which I think is the info that many people are most interested in. So on page 35, this is a detailed budget to actual. Couple items that I'll point out is, right away in the taxes section, these are the revenues to start. You can see the public accommodation taxes or the room taxes, those consistently are still above budget. Obviously it's good to have a conservative budget, as if the economy were to tank, I bet you there would be a pretty big fluctuation in those. But I think, in Door County, the town has been benefiting from the great economy that we've had and, the use of that room tax. So that was good to see that above budget and to have that trend continue. Special assessments, you'll see there's a revenue within that line of about 75,000. That is relating to, in 2020 there was the demolition of the Muscat property, and then in 2021, that cleanup and everything that was charged, and so that is now a revenue in this year since it was put onto the 2020 tax roll, which it's always delayed a year. So that's where that is coming from. Going down the revenues, I mean, everything was pretty much well in line or higher than what was anticipated. So all good indicators there. Going on to the next page, 36, this is where the start of the expenditures are. Everything was pretty well in line or coming in under budget. The public works line, a little bit over in the road maintenance and construction, which sometimes it's hard to estimate what some of those items are going to come at. It looked like there was just a few road repairs that went over budget, but nothing major or concerning there. One thing I'd like to point out is the snow removal was then under budget, which obviously that can change year to year. And so overall, in the public works area, the total was under what was budgeted. So, one line goes over, one line goes under, no big deal there. And those continue, all the expenditures continue through page 37. And you can see then that, overall the expenditures were a little bit over what was budgeted, but nothing major. And like I said, overall the town came in at a fund balance greater, or they added to their fund balance by that 76,000. So on page 38, this is what's called the Yellow Book report or the internal control report, and it's another item that we're required to do as part of the audit. It's basically explaining that we take a look at the town's internal controls. We don't necessarily provide an opinion on those controls, that they're designing appropriately, but we base our audit around what those controls are. For a place like the town of Sevastopol, there's just not an accounting team of 10 people where there can be all of the correct controls in place. So, there's a little bit more risk there, but nothing that we don't have at a lot of our other smaller municipalities. And then we make sure our audit procedures are designed around based on what we're seeing with those controls in place to make sure that these financial statements are materially correct. So this is kind of going over how that impacts financial reporting. So also within this report, we list out what the findings were for the audit. So towards the bottom of the page, it kind of describes how we did have a material weakness this year, which I'll go over in a second. And then there were 2 significant deficiencies. So the information relating to those starts on page 40. So what I always like to tell people is to compare the findings in last year's report to this year's report and then understand any differences or changes in those, because it can give you a snapshot of what's been going on or what's changed. So on page 40, it has the finding for adjustments to the town's financial records. So a lot of times, there's some additional expertise that might be needed for year-end type items that come up. They can be not routine in nature, and so sometimes they can be missed or forgotten, or just you're not necessarily aware of how they need to be handled because it only comes up once every few years or once a year in general. So as part of the audit, we take a look to make sure that these financial statements are materially correct. And I think the complexities of the ARPA funding this year and making sure that any amounts that weren't spent, having those recorded as unearned, that was an item that kind of falls into why this finding is within here. And then also how to handle items that are paid ahead of when the expense occurred, such as that fire protection. So those are not routine items, and I can tell you that we've had this finding need to be added at many of our jobs, just because if you look down in that recommendation, in that second sentence, it says, well, it may not be cost beneficial to hire additional staff. A lot of times you would need to hire or, get additional training. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint what that training would need to be, just because there are so many different items that can fall into those one-time occurring items. So this is a common finding that we have pop up year to year. I can tell you a few years ago, we did have this finding and it kind of went away just because Amy, there was additional adjustments that we had been doing with the tax roll and those had been cleaned up. So we no longer needed those, which speaks well to Amy's ability. She's learning and everything. And, we kind of talked on some of these oddball items that came up this year, and, we'll just kind of see how those items are shaking out next year. And I'm sure Amy will take a stab at, watching that those prepaid items are either paid or just recorded correctly going forward. But no concerns there. Like I said, this is a very common finding that we have across many of our municipalities, especially with all the ARPA funding that's going through and the different treatment that is required based on if the funding is recognized or not, whether it's been spent. On page 41, at the top of this is the segregation of duties relating to the clerk treasurer position. Obviously, it's one position with one person doing everything, so it results in it's just a risk that we have for the audit because there isn't a proper segregation of duties. This is also a repeated finding from last year. And then on page 42, preparation of the annual report. This is another repeat finding, another very common one, just because of the level of knowledge and expertise that's required to prepare these financial statements and make sure the standards are being met. It just requires a level of detail that it's not worth it to pay somebody to be able to do this. And so it's, contracted out to us, and that's okay to do that. It's just a finding that we're required because of that. So that is the big financial report. And then I'll just touch on the governance communication very briefly. The governance communication, it would list anything that, was a major red flag. If we had a disagreement with management, if we had significant difficulties, if we didn't agree with, some of the accounting policies or anything like that, it would show up in here. The fact that you're kind of getting this report and you haven't heard much from us is an indication that there's nothing too major within here. So very quickly, there were no new accounting policies. That's kind of in the middle of the page. Otherwise, we would list out anything that was put in place over this last year. It talks briefly about the estimates, one of them being the depreciable life of capital assets, just because we don't know whether a truck's going to last 5 years or 15 years. And as that's being depreciated over time, it's an estimate. The estimate of the net pension liability, it's audited by the state, but obviously there's a lot that can go into, when are people retire, how many people, and so on. So it's an estimate in the end, and we utilize their information from the state in order to record that net pension asset that it has been. Going on to the second page, we talk about any corrected misstatements. So those are bulleted in the middle. So I talk about that, the prepaid expense for fire protection, the unearned revenues with the unspent ARPA funds, the tax roll entries that we do as an audit service, those are just listed in here, and then any other accounts payable that might be noted. And the rest of this is pretty much standard disclosures, just, kind of if there was another auditor brought in for any other reason or a consultation with management, but otherwise there's not much else. So I believe that's all of the information that I have. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. Amy has my contact information. I'm more than happy to go into any additional detail that might be needed or answer any specific questions. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate working with Amy and everyone on the board as we're working through our many questions and requests that's needed to get through the audit. Amy is always so great to work with, and we appreciate all of her help. She is very responsive and gets us things ASAP. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you. Have a great night. Hi, everyone.
Anyone have any specific questions relative to the financial statements? Either something we can answer or if need be?
I might send her an email. Because in previous years, we've been on an accrual basis for probably, I don't know, 8 years now, 7 or 8 years now. So she made reference to that fire.
Prepayment of the fire protection.
Policy or whatever for our fire protection. In previous years, because we are on an accrual basis, they would just make a journal entry to adjust that. So say, for instance, we did not get the final bill for snow plowing of 2020 until January or February of 2021, they would just make a journal adjustment to our books. So we were on a true accrual. So I'm kind of surprised that she did not suggest that journal adjustment. So
It was a deficiency.
And then, like she said, there's 6 boring pages discussing the pension plan. The only thing that stood out to me, and it was on page 31, the town's proportionate share of actuarial assumptions. There was big differences there between 2020 and 2021, and I didn't catch that to ask her ahead of time, but maybe I'll shoot you an email.
Absolutely.
And you can ask Elizabeth about it.
Amy's the only one that is on the pension, just as a footnote.
Right.
The rest of us don't pay property taxes as part of our responsibilities, right?
Like I said, there's big differences between those 2 years as to the town's liability. I don't understand this pension plan at all, believe me, other than we pay 6.75%. But
All right, anything else from anyone else on this topic? Hugh? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, on the detailed listing of assets, it shows the revenues that we get as part of the room tax. I believe in 2021, the municipalities were starting to get charged for operational costs of the tourism zone. Was that in 2021?
We haven't.
no, we haven't.
It's 2020, it started in 2022.
So it started in
2022.
2022. So that'll be an expense line item we'll be able to.
Correct.
And we have not gotten a bill from them as of yet.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Very good, thank you.
Yep, Tom?
Is there a use it or lose it deadline for these unspent ARPA funds?
2026.
Oh, that's
a long time.
Yeah. I guarantee you, we will not lose it. You can bank on that particular piece, yes.
The number in here, does that reflect the total ARPA funds that will be coming in, or do they come in?
No, we get it split roughly half, a little, I think it's a little less than half or a little
It
more
was
than half.
right about half, and the second payment's gonna come in around June 10th this year.
Be around 270,000.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right, with that, we don't have to bother her, so she'll be happy probably. We'd ask the Fire Chief, Chief Detman, if he would take us through the Sturgeon Bay Fire Department's annual recap.
Thank you. So we'll just step through the annual fire report. A lot of pages are very similar to what they are in the past, but we'll have something different. So at the beginning of the front page, just a letter to myself, kind of describes well who we are, what we do, and things like that, and there's some interesting numbers in here. We provide high-quality emergency prevention, risk reduction educational services, more than 13,100 residents within 130 square miles of our first two response. So this is the city and the two townships that we provide coverage to. So 130 square miles is a very sizable response area, especially being first two. We did some comparisons between our 10-year and our 20-year, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but a lot of people don't realize how much our full-time crews and our part-time crews do within the station. We handle all of our own maintenance, all of our own public education, testing, and a lot of the items that a lot of places end up farming out. So you'll see as we get through here, we are extremely busy. Our call volume's up. The demand for services continues to grow. We're finding that the customers that we're serving on all of our areas, their level of expectation when they call is for us to be at their front door by the time they hang up. So COVID has definitely increased some of the things that we're dealing with too, but it's been a busy couple of years. So as we get through the next page is our mission statement, statement of values, which is what they have been. That. Fire department staffing. We were one short on our part-time. That's the one spot where we've been back and forth. We are at full staff again. Currently, we have one of our part-time firefighters from the town that is from the Ukraine. He and his wife had gone back. They're spending a couple months back there assisting with the humanitarian effort. So we are short him right now, and we know he's doing well. So. A little bit, next couple pages, just a little bit about our stations. We do have 3 stations, one on each side of the bay. We look at our staffing and our equipment, which are each one of these are older pictures that we need to change. I apologize for that. Apparatus on the next page is our 2021 apparatus. There's been a few changes coming into this year, so we've not really increased or decreased anything, just kind of modified. Next page is our incident summary. This is where we get a little bit more of the interesting numbers and things like that. So total call volume from the Sturgeon Bay Fire Department, again, all of our jurisdictions was 1,694 calls, which is the highest we've had so far. Town of Sevastopol, we had a total of 93 calls. 74 were fire-related, not true fire calls, but fire-related calls, and 19 medical-related calls. Down at the bottom, you'll see that the average response times for the town emergent was 9 minutes 33 seconds, non-emergent 12 minutes 12 seconds. Again, this is a hard one for a lot of people to understand because it's in relative where we're at or where the call's at. All the calls could be in the southern part of your township, and our times would be quite a bit quicker. If they were all up in Clark's Lake, it'd be quite a bit different. So again, it's our average response time. The next page is our incident type by jurisdictions, breakdown of where our calls, all of our calls were last year. Nothing really glaring to the town. We did have one structure fire that was on Cherry Road last year. In December, I believe it was, 4270 Cherry Road. Very fortunate that WPS was there when this happened and they were able to get up and knock it down, or we would have had some people that would have felt at home at around Christmas. So, medical assists were up to 19 last year. Again, going through all the different calls, you can see there's nothing glaring. Fire alarm, no activation. It was 11, 21 vehicle accidents. You do have a fair amount of busy highway within the town. But again, nothing very concerning. We see the alarm activation, no fire. That's been up and down. It all depends on which kids are pulling fire alarms sometimes, or storms that set alarms off and things like that. Or if a resort is doing an alarm test and they forget to call into their alarm company, and we respond and find out that they were just doing some maintenance or testing. So.
Next up, just one quick question.
Sure.
About burn permits?
Yep, I was going to get to that in the next page.
Well, in that case, I'll wait.
Okay. Top of the next page, that's a staff hour summary. You'll see right up on top, last year we performed 86 burn permits within the town of Sevastopol. Fire inspections within the town, we had 85.38 hours, of which 133 normal inspections, 17 re-inspections, and 4 occupancy. The occupancy inspections, we work very closely with the building inspector. So as he's going out and doing some, not residential, but anything that's non, we work with him on those, so. Again, it's not broke down to everything. As we get down, you'll see that there's a fair amount of time spent both on equipment and station maintenance, public fire and safety education, which we believe is very big. And one thing that's taken off for us is our community CPR, providing CPR and AED training at an extremely minimal cost to a lot of different businesses and public or social groups and things like that. So if anybody has any needs, you're more than welcome to reach out to our assistant chief and she can get things scheduled for you. It's always good to know. The next couple pages are just going to be our 5 and 10-year incident comparisons, total calls. The first graph that you see on there is just our total, again, in general with all our jurisdictions. In a 20-year comparison, we've increased 84.93%, and in a 10-year, it's been 51.25%. And again, that's overall of all our jurisdictions. The second page of the comparison, the top is the town of Sevastopol. Again, last year we had 93 calls, 74 of which were fire related, and 19 medical related. In a 10-year comparison, we're up about 24% within the town.
Tim, do you know a statewide increase? Like
that one, I'm not sure.
Okay.
COVID really threw a lot of things. That'd be an interesting number. I've not looked at that one. That's going to be a high number. Very high number, I'm pretty sure. If you look at, on that one too, we look at, back to 2019, we had 90 fire-related calls. I think that's about the time when we started making that determination, or you as a town decided that we need to look at some burning permits because of some larger incidents that we're compiling. So I do believe that the process that we have now is working. We've not had the incidents that we had a couple of years ago, and we're not getting stuck out on long calls that didn't need to be. So we're very happy with how that process is working.
Not any more than I am. It was a great change. It's reduced the frequency of calls and the concerns, and it's been terrific, and I'm grateful for your guys.
We did change a couple things on our end, and basically it was just when people call in, we've now put a prompt on our main lines. We can call in. This is if you're calling for a burning permit, please press 1, and it doesn't just go to our house, not our station numbers. It actually gets pushed out to our engine phones and things like that, because we've had a lot of times that our crews have been up in the town doing a burn permit on a Saturday, and there's times that we run 5-6 permits on a Saturday or weekend. They've been up here, they get back to the station to find they've had a message, and they got to come back up here to get back to the station. That's happened a few times, so we've changed that process, and now that when they're out, they're getting the calls when they're out in the field. So I think the town has become very well educated. We've not had any issues, complaints, or anything like that, so we're very happy with how that's working. The last handful of pages are just a little bit more of our agency overview. Again, the fire service has really evolved in the last 5, 10, 20 years. It's no longer just running on some vehicle accidents and fires. Rescue task force. We do quite a bit of public education, community risk reduction. We really feel that our time spent in that field is paid off in dividends. So fire prevention, and our inspections show that we run, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it was on the prior page, I believe it was right around 2,500 inspections annually. I'm not sure if that was. Yeah, 1,800. Yeah, well, it's just the total hours there. So we are a fair amount of inspections that we do complete throughout all of our communities. So shipboard firefighting obviously is something that has really taken off. It's one of our largest target hazards within our main jurisdiction, which is incorporated all the departments throughout the county. And again, just some stuff on our training site, ice and water rescues, describing a little bit. The picture that's in that photograph is off the quarry last year. Gentleman had a little issue with his boat. about as low as it got into the water, and it was towed back in, they were all fine, so. Again, public education, public risk, is a big thing. And as you see, there's a couple photos on the end here, the very last one was with our city council. I apologize, when Sparky, the fire dog, was making his rounds, he did not get up to one of your meetings, but I can guarantee you he will be up here this year, so. Plan on sometime during Fire Prevention Month to, have a visit from Sparky, so.
Sounds encouraging.
It is, it's a lot of fun. Very well trained.
I was wondering if he was going to be here for that.
He would have, but I think he got Mr. Steve was a rabbit. Sure.
Tim, regarding the burn permits that you're issuing now, and yes, that is very much appreciated. Have people been abiding by it? Have you
Yes.
had to
Yep.
issue any citations or
No,
going
we've not
on
had to.
premises inspections?
No, you know, we've had a couple, we've had one within your jurisdiction that we've had a little bit more of a problem with. We've handled that ourselves, and we've eliminated burning permits for this property completely. So when we do our burn permits, we do it electronically, meaning we've got a tablet, we get out there, we get all the information, we physically take a picture of what they're burning. And it's proved to be very beneficial as we go back, and we've had a couple complaints and find out what they're burning, and we pull up the picture that's in their permit and find out they've added things that they shouldn't have, so. We were very close in issuing a couple ordinance violations from the county, but we've not had that problem for a few months, so.
And I heard that you initiated the marine fire training as well, that you hosted the first one.
We did, yes. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So shipboard, again, shipboard firefighting has become, unfortunately, we've had some major incidents in the city, and we've realized that it's completely different than what we're normally used to fighting a structure fire. And I've been pushing with the Coast Guard and departments throughout the Great Lakes and District 9 for a new initiative. And last week we hosted a firefighting symposium or get together with fire chiefs from Duluth, Minnesota out to Erie, Pennsylvania, through all the major ports and bigger cities, along with Coast Guard representation from all 4 of the districts in the Great Lakes and out of district out of Cleveland. So it was a very good conference, very good. We created a lot of great training for everybody. So.
Anyone from the floor have any questions of the fire chief?
Do you have an explanation for why the fraction of total incidents in Sevastopol are mainly fire, and in Sturgeon Bay, the town or the city are mostly
so population-based, we've got a very large, I don't want to say elderly, but older community. The call volume we look at within the town, it's the fire-related calls 74, 76, and if you look at the sheet where it spells it out, I believe 20, if I'm not mistaken here, 21 were vehicle accidents. So when we say fire calls, it's not a true fire call. When you look at here, it's either a medical call or a fire-related call. So we don't have as many. You have your own EMR group here that runs on medical calls, and you're going to do their report next. So we supplement with the 19 calls that we were in last year is when whatever the circumstance was, where they needed a little extra help, or somebody wasn't available, or just whatever it may have been. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Fire Chief, Mr. Denton. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you or some substitute at some future meeting. All right. With that, we're going to move on to the EMRs, a review for 2021. Ashley Stotts is the new crew chief for the EMRs. And in our town, we've been fortunate to have our own EMR group. They've been quite responsive, and they've helped some people who really needed that help. And a lot of our community has been extremely generous with donations back to the town, which we have earmarked and have in reserve strictly for EMR activities. We plan on having an EMR review on our annual meeting in the future. There's been changes in the past that have prevented that, but we look forward to hearing from Ashley this year, next year, and the year after, or however many years, and thank her and her crew for with great response that our community has had, and I'll give you the floor for a few minutes. How will that be?
All right, so I don't have anything near as detailed or fancy as Tim does, so. So for 2021, the town of Sevastopol, or the Sevastopol EMR group was paged to 214 EMS incidents, which is up. I don't have any years prior information, but it is definitely up. Our numbers throughout the whole county were up in 2021. Response by Sevastopol EMRs, out of that 214, we had 85 that we had a response from our EMRs. Remind you with that, a lot of our EMRs have other full-time jobs. We are a volunteer service in this area.
That's good.
We are always working on recruiting as well. We did bring on 4 new members this year. One of them is also away at college for nursing school, so whether she's here or not is kind of hit or miss depending on the time of year, or time of year and her weekends. I had that Sturgeon Bay responded to 11 calls with no EMR response, but Tim had 19. The difference there could be we got 1 EMR that responded, but it wasn't enough for lifting help, and we may have paged Sturgeon Bay in to come and assist, even though we had EMRs that responded as well.
I thought he was just taking credit for our council.
We appreciate their help. As somebody that also works on the ambulance, we try not to call them out unless we get there and we know, yes, we're going to need them for additional help to lift or anything like that. So we try not to abuse them too much. Training, biannually the EMRs do complete an EMR refresher. Normally that would have been completed by now. However, due to COVID, that was postponed. Couldn't get any classes. Many of the members had chosen that they would like to hold off because we do have 2 years to complete it, now 3. They wanted to hold off until we could do an in-person class. You can do more hands-on training and you just get more out of it than trying to do it virtually. So that will be completed prior to June of 2023. We're looking at some different options on how we can do some in-house training as well in the future. And we usually do that training with Egg Harbor as well. We have 2 members that have announced that they will be retiring July 1st of 2023. That is when their current Wisconsin state license will no longer be active, and they're not going to do the continuing education to refresh. And they've been with us for quite some time. One other topic, so obviously 85 calls that we had responders to out of 214 is less than 50%. It's not a great number. I'm going to bring this up now just because technically we are not part of the current resolution when I was looking at it. Is that okay to bring up pay right now for the EMRs?
You certainly can bring it up.
Okay. If not, we can revisit it later.
You will be revisiting it later.
So we're not on the current resolution or listed under there, so a new one would need to be created for us, which we do have a written proposal for that. However, it's not completed because we don't have a resolution number. But what I would like to do is raise the pay for EMRs from $15 an hour, which is what they're currently getting. So if you go to a call, it's usually less than an hour. They're making $15, which depending, that's obviously not the reason that anybody's responding as a first responder, but I'd like to give them a little more incentive to get them out the door, especially at 3, 4 in the morning. So our request would be to increase that to $25 per hour, which is pretty much in line with our neighboring volunteer departments. Currently, I'll use Egg Harbor as an example. They're $21.50 an hour, but they are, from my understanding, looking to increase that as well. Last year, out of our EMR call pay, we had budgeted $4,500 and we used $2,100. So we didn't even use half of it, so I don't believe that making this change would put us over budget for 2022.
Okay. Is that per hour or per call?
Per hour, but very rarely do we have a call that lasts more than an hour. Usually if we do, it'd be, let's say, a rescue from Cave Point. Potentially could go over a car accident, things like that, but majority of calls are an hour or less.
Our normal procedure would be to take a look at that in October when we plan for our annual budget, just so that we don't get Elizabeth upset. Just kidding here, okay. But we will take a look at it at a future board meeting, because there are some things I think that the board would be interested in understanding more about with respect to your group. And we were able to find a copy of the bylaws, which from the date on them went back to 2006. So we'd like to talk about having those refreshed and some other things as well. And then we can discuss putting this change in pay on a future town board meeting agenda, if that works for you. Okay. Anyone? Go ahead.
So, not you. Well, it's my understanding that the EMRs are paid a committee per diem at $15 an hour for attending a meeting, correct?
Correct.
And then they also receive currently, it used to be $10, now it's $15 if they respond to a call, correct?
Correct.
So,
However, I wouldn't necessarily consider the EMR group a committee.
Okay.
Well, they should be considered a licensed group because they fall under the licensure. They're not elected. Nobody's elected really by the governing body onto the committee.
Well, I think that the key thing here is we just need to sit down and get regrounded. You know, over the years that I've been on the town board, we had John Stevenis, which I believe is still a current EMR with your group. Fortunate to have him on the town, and he filled in a lot of the things that, you know, we weren't necessarily keeping up to speed because we had him. We've had a little bit with the addition of Derek, but I think we need to regroup, understand what your goals, objectives are, update the bylaws, look at what directional things that you want to do. We are certainly interested in, you know, doing the necessary things to keep your group gainfully, I won't say gainful, but interested in maintaining the level of service or increasing it that they've given us. So I don't want to shoot anything down, but I think we just kind of need to sit down and regroup in terms of where we're at and then move ahead from there. So, anyone else on the board have questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your coming this evening. All right. Next on the agenda, Jeannie Vogel is going to take us through broadband, a little bit of where we are and where we are going.
Hey, Ashley. What's your response on that?
I'm sorry.
You ready?
We flip those lights off over her head. Are they okay?
It's 17 minutes.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Vogel. Thank you for attending the annual meeting.
Jeannie, we should give you a microphone.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, is that better?
Will be.
Yes? No?
Try one more time.
Move it towards you a little. There you go.
That's, oh, how are we now? Nothing?
Yep.
Still not okay?
I can hear you.
Okay now.
Yes?
Yep. we can hear you.
Okay. I think I'm gonna rearrange. Okay. So again, hello, I'm Jeannie Vogel. Thank you for attending the annual meeting. As chair of the Communications and Technology Committee, there we go, I will be updating you on broadband. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions. Okay? So this is the overview. I will talk about why, where, what's next, and make recommendations. So background, how we got here. In 2019, I was elected, before I was elected, there was a broadband survey sent out with the tax bills. 162 people responded. It was a low response, but 92% of those responding were unsatisfied with their speed and the reliability of their service. In March of 2020, with the onset of the pandemic, we experienced school closures and many business shutdowns, and our life in general was shut down. So Sevastopol School Superintendent Kyle Lutke informed me that 18 to 20% of the children had either no internet or unreliable internet service at their homes. The school's remedy was to supply hotspots, but for many, even those did not solve the problem. We became aware of grant funding, a program available through the Public Service Commission. To apply, it would be necessary for us to partner with an internet service provider. Door County Broadband and Bug Tussle gave presentations to the town board. The Communications and Technology Committee members met to review the information provided. The committee recommended that we partner with Door County Broadband. The town agreed and also agreed to provide matching funds. In early 2021, the grant was denied. It appeared that the RSPSC's philosophy and focus had shifted from wireless to fiber. Other options currently available: Charter Spectrum, providing cable, fiber, servicing some areas of Sevastopol, predominantly on our shorelines. 4G, 5G cellular service, a line of sight access to cell towers is needed. Starlink, a satellite service, is used by some people in our community. The cost of equipment, over $500, and the monthly fees for new customers is now $110 per month. Other satellite companies like HughesNet have also proven to have slow speeds and reliability issues. Oops. Moving forward. In 2021, the Broadband Steering Committee of the Door County Economic Development Corporation confirmed an overall far-reaching assessment was needed. Findlay Engineering, the leading broadband consulting firm in the nation, was hired. Sevastopol and other towns, the city of Sturgeon Bay, the county of Door County Medical Center, and others helped to fund the $60,000 cost. The Findlay study assessed cable, wireless, DSL, and cellular options being used by residents and businesses. They could not find a wireless solution that made sense due to the housing density, trees, and topography. After consideration of all technologies, it was determined that optical fiber was the best solution. On the last slide of this presentation, you will find a link to the summary of the Findlay study. The link is also posted on the Sevastopol Town website. Why fiber? For the future of our community, telemedicine, access to your doctor, smart technology, thermostat, security systems, appliances, video conferencing, Zoom, Skype, video streaming, Netflix, Hulu, Disney, online shopping, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, improved access to online education for all levels and all ages, improved access to online businesses, retain the value of real estate. Without adequate broadband, homeowners can see a decrease of $12,000 to $20,000 in value. Looks like I'm going to have to play catch up on all these. Where are we now in current status and cost estimates? So I'll just go over the survey that many of you, about 473 of you, responded to out of the 2,140 surveys that were mailed. The residents that responded were about 95%, businesses a little over 5%, year-round residents numbered about 61%. The range of download speeds was 0.23 megabits per second to 1,000 megabits per second. the upload speeds 0.01 megabits per second to 49 megabits per second. The respondents were willing to pay an average cost of $76 per month. The response to the question, how likely are you to subscribe to broadband internet service at the speed and the amount you're willing to pay? The definite subscribed 51%, very likely over 27%, making that about 78%. In early February, the county administrator contacted our town indicating that Charter Spectrum was proposing a multi-town partnership with the purpose of obtaining a PSC grant to submit by March 17th. The towns involved had 2 virtual meetings with Spectrum. Spectrum provided maps of the areas for expansion. In Sevastopol, that area included the area along 4257 highway corridor, as well as the Clark Lake area. Spectrum asked the towns to contribute some of ARPA rescue plan money. The consensus of all town chairmen was to contribute $100 per address. In Sevastopol, addresses totaled approximately 224, which would make our contribution $22,400. The County of Door agreed to contribute $25 per address for each town. Spectrum wrote and submitted the grant to the PSC, the Public Service Commission, indicating their contribution would be approximately 30% of the project cost. Keep in mind that this grant cycle, there's $100 million available. There were 194 applications totaling almost $500 million. We should be notified of the outcome sometime this summer. Based on the Finley study, the approximate cost for supplying fiber to the premises is $62,000 per mile. The town of Sevastopol has approximately 85 miles of town road. At $62,000 per mile, the approximate cost is $5,270,000. There are many federal and state grants available, which could cover as much as 50% of the cost, making this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our community. What's next? The Communication and Technology Committee will be researching all grant funding available and interview internet service providers. I will continue to reach out and collaborate with other broadband committee chairs and other sources to obtain as much information as possible. The Finley study indicated that all of the towns will need additional engineering studies to have a better idea of the actual costs. It will involve road-by-road, pole-by-pole analysis, determining if the poles have space for fiber lines. This means that most of the fiber will need to go on poles rather than the ground because of Sevastopol's issue with rock that we're all very aware of. So, next, the recommendation. So the recommendation of the Communication Technology Committee is to have a special meeting in the coming months to keep you informed and to allow for more discussion of this very important once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Did I say once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? So I believe expressing gratitude is very important. So first of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you for being interested. I will also thank the members of the committee, Derek Demise, Paul Kesserall, Pal Wickman, Jim Mitchie, who has served on the committee for 2 years, but has left the committee in search of more adventure. And recently added Steve Jenkins, as former head of the Door County Economic Development Corporation, has already been very helpful, and he will be a great source of knowledge for us. Thank you to all the members of the board, to the people who help educate me in all aspects broadband, Jim Nellen, Dave and Karen Studebaker, Kurt Kiefer, Jessica Hatch, and others. And a special thanks to my daughter, Carissa, who helped me with this presentation. Without her help and guidance, I truly would not have been able to do this. So, please take the opportunity to be informed. Okay? Read the Finley Engineering Executive Summary. Watch and listen to the public broadband presentation recordings. The links are available, as I said, on our website. So, thank you again. Now, any questions? Yeah, Mary?
Could you describe just a little bit more if the Spectrum grant proposal goes through, where would it go?
I actually have a map with me if you want to see it later. Mostly along the Highway 4257 corridor. They have some presence there now. There'd be about an additional 54-ish, somewhere in there, additional addresses that they're looking at. And then Clark Lake, which is, I think, in the neighborhood of 166 or so addresses. That's on the Sevastopol side. Jacksonport's also involved in this, so it would cover the Jacksonport side as well.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? Yes?
It still leaves a whole lot of us in the dark.
Exactly, yeah. We totally understand. This really only happened, Charter reached out. We were already starting to look at ISPs, internet service providers. But Charter reached out kind of based on the date of March 17th being the deadline. We knew that we wouldn't be prepared on our own to go and try to get in on this grant cycle. But Charter jumped in, for Spectrum, and approached this group of, I think there's 6 towns, mostly in the Southern Door area, actually. It's just Sevastopol and Jacksonport in the Northern Door. It was unexpected, and it was Dan and I met with them. We were part of the virtual meeting, and I think that we just looked at it as being an opportunity. I think when I mentioned how many applications there are, and the other thing that's generally what the Public Service Commission looks at is they like to see what they consider a true partnership is an ISP and a town or a municipality, whatever the body is, coming up with 50% of a cost, okay? And then the other would be funded. So this is a reach if you do the numbers. Charter willing to come up with 30%, and the town's only, for example, we're one of the bigger numbers, coming up with just $22,000 with the other. I mean, we're not anywhere near even probably 35%. So I don't give it a whole lot of opportunity, but we will be reaching out. We have a lot of work to do. We will be talking to a number of internet service providers. We've already talked with, we had Insight here for one of our committee meetings. Everyone is invited to our committee meetings. We love your input. If there's anything that you want to tell us or you want to know, please reach out. Be happy to share whatever I can. But yeah, we have a challenge here. There is no question. We are very rural, except for our coastlines and that area of Clark Lake. We are rural as can be, and we're big. We have a big community, so lots of space and lots of distance between places. And the additional engineering study is so important because we don't know, again, because of our rock, we know we're gonna probably have to hang fiber. So the cost of, if the pole needs to be replaced, Wisconsin Public Service is not gonna do that. I mean, there are new poles that they have put in some new poles. So you would think that those are the right height and they would be able to handle another line, right? But there are probably poles out there that aren't. And so that cost could be in the neighborhood of $300 or more a pole. So I look at the 5 million plus as being a maybe cost. It could go higher, could be, I doubt if it would be lower, but again, remember that's for everyone, and a lot of folks are already covered. Have enough coverage, like if the charter areas, they tend to have at least 100 megabits or so down. Some are experiencing 200 megabits per second down, so you won't, the one thing that these grants do not, well, in the case of the PSC grant in particular, they, and a lot of the other government, they're not going to allow you to double up coverage. Okay, so if somebody's already covered with that kind of speed, they won't be eligible for grant. Okay, so there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah, Dale.
It's my understanding that this fall there's another round of money that's going to be available.
It's expected, yes, is expected.
And that's going to be late this fall, early this fall?
We don't know, it's not been announced.
Okay.
So we expect
the first one
that.
is already done, and now this next one will be available for you.
Yeah, and there's, I was just reading something today about more money that just, the president just signed a bill on March 15th called the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, providing $550 million for broadband projects. So we just, those are the kinds of things we have to delve into and say, okay, are we eligible for this piece of pie? And that actually is only going to be through September 30th. So there's a lot to be done and a lot to look at, so. Anyone
Any other
else?
questions from the floor?
Yeah, Hugh.
Jeannie, first of all, thanks to you and your team for digging into this for the town. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
One of the things that was talked about in the Finley study and has been reiterated is the importance of engineering studies.
Yeah.
And the linchpin to get an engineering study done accurately is to have good survey data. And so I know there's been some great work done to date relative to getting town residents and businesses to provide survey results. What are the kind of next steps that we can do as residents or engage, say, with the Sevastopol School District, et cetera, to try to get that number up? Because, as you say, time is of the essence, and waiting for survey results, is going to be a challenge. Is there some things that you have some thoughts on how we can improve that?
Well, first of all, those that are listening will listen to this video recording. How about you respond to the survey? It takes 5 minutes, and it's on our website. So you just respond. Don't look at it as being a deadline. Just respond, because that information will, Zach at the county level will be doing some geotagging. That's a fancy name for putting these little address, dots, where people that have responded onto a map. So, and as a matter of fact, he's already in the process of doing that for us. The challenges that they have, and so just to step back from it, Jessica Hatch has been hired as the coordinator, because one of the things the broadband study said is, go out and get a coordinator to oversee everyone, okay, so all the towns. So be that almost like the liaison, that overview person that can pass on information, share information. She's going to be coming to our next Communications Technology Committee meeting, which is on the 25th. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And at 2:00. So she will be there more so just to say hello, but I'm sure there's also some things. She just got on the job on the 11th of April. So, but she has a lot of knowledge, because you notice I mentioned her name. She worked for Door County Broadband. And so I learned a lot from Jess in the process of working on the wireless solution we were trying to work on in 2020. So So she also called me and said, you know, one of the challenges is the way people responded with their address, and that's one of the things that Zach also told me in a conversation was, we have to find a way of getting people to write their address in a way that corresponds to the way the county has them. Otherwise, I guess it's a real headache to go through them. So Jess is probably going to address that, I would think, at our meeting, and maybe she can clarify that. And maybe if there's, you know, future respondents, we can make sure that they respond with their address in a correct form. That will be helpful. Jess even mentioned possibly another survey, but more pinpoint type thing, and I'm not sure exactly what she means by that, but we'll find out. But there's a tremendous amount of work, there's a tremendous amount of money out there, and that's why it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And, you know, if you look at the town, having the ability, because we've been really good with money, and so having the ability to borrow the funds, and then when you get the funding, it can be paid back, and you use it, would use, I forget what the name of the agency is, but it's a state agency, and the interest is low, and there's no penalty for paying money back, you know, at an earlier time or whatever. So we have a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think the approach we're going to take in interviewing other internet service providers is that almost with the thought that this won't happen with Charter. I think that's the approach that we're going to take, you know, just because we have to keep moving forward. So I think that's more of the approach we're going to take. And there's been a lot of information out there of different cellular companies doing 5G, and you know, I don't think that's a long-term solution, but it could be a short-term solution. I know that Starlink, because Derek has Starlink, he keeps me informed on Starlink, and they've opened up a new area. So if anybody would have an interest in that, there is a small section, another section in Sevastopol toward the east side and down into the town of Sturgeon Bay. But in that area, maybe a little bit along the corridor, the highway corridor. If you're interested in connecting with Starlink, you know, contact Starlink, because that's, you know, again, I look at Starlink as being probably not the end-all, be-all, do-all, because, well, one, their equipment is very expensive, and so is their monthly service. And that's going to be a non-starter for a lot of folks.
The wait list for Starlink is also a year and a half out, so even
No,
if you
that's
call.
only if you're on the wait list
yeah.
and the cell is closed.
It just, yes,
But the
there's.
cell that's open, you should get the equipment within a week and a half.
I called and they said it'd be a year and a half.
Okay, well, this was, I meant.
Yeah, and I called within a month.
Yeah, and
so-
that's the way I've known it to be, is
It's a
it's
year
a
and a
long
half.
way. And, yeah, it's not a real solution. But keep in mind, you know, hopefully when this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we will take, I hope, take advantage of, still, it will take years to actually implement. Okay, so it's not going to happen like that for the majority of us. And believe me, I'm one of those that needs better connection. So I feel your pain. Any other questions? Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
Just in case this hasn't really sunk in, at some particular point in time, when and if we have the necessary information, we may be coming back to the town and saying, look, we want to borrow $2, $3, whatever, $1 million, which will go on your tax bill, my tax bill as well, to try and provide this service. Now, it's a very involved subject because Charter does service a lot of the lake shore. So we're not looking, at least on the surface here, to provide an alternative service to those that already have it. So I happen to have charter at home, that's great. So, but I still may be contributing towards the cause to provide service for those people, especially in the interior of the town that have virtually no service.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a challenge. There are alternative solutions today. We have 5G coming, which is a total surprise, by Cellcom, US Cellular, and
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile, thank you. None of those providers a year or 2 years ago would have ever come here, but they're now being pushed by the fact that if they don't move into this marketplace, their customer base will be consumed by all of these other vendors in the marketplace, which is why Charter came forward. And up north, you find Frontier Telephone wants to save its user base, so they went in and applied for grants. So there's a lot of work to do. Eventually, if it makes sense, we'll come back and we'll say, do you want us to do this? And provide that service and bring everybody in the town into what century are we? But like we said, more to do. We'll have the necessary communications out there. If you talk to your friends and neighbors, they're interested, have them come to the meetings. Jeannie has her meeting and more than willing to have you participate and ask questions so that we make the right decisions. And unfortunately, like she did say, it's not going to be a quick process. Even if we moved ahead tomorrow, it could be a couple years before you'd see a shovel turn. The only alternative to that is if Charter is successful in its bid, they are prepared to start construction right away. But everything else is going to be planned, and keep in mind that we have every other town in the county and throughout the state that's going to be competing not only for money, but they're going to be competing for construction workers to do this. So anyway, that's the summary for that, but we will move on. Okay, we have what I'll call the year in review, and then we'll go through the last parts of this. And basically all I wanted to do for a couple minutes is just highlight some of the things that we've accomplished this year. And some of these things, by the way, we accomplished in the years prior. I'll start with property taxes. They are low. If you hadn't seen the news and the Pulse, we did a survey. We are the third lowest community in Door County in terms of its tax base. And I think we would have been second by, I think we missed by 1 or 2 cents. So the town board has been judicial use of your funds, which I think is a good thing. And we've done that year over year. If you were to track your property tax bill, and I'm talking the town's portion, we have nothing to do with the school, we have nothing to do with the rest of them, but the town's portion hasn't changed a dime, I think, in 10 years. So we continue to work to maintain that as necessary. Over the last year, we were able to increase our paving budget by 60%, which was great. So for the first time in a few years, we were able to pave more than a mile of road, and we have 87 miles of road. We're on a 30 to 40 year cycle.
I missed 2.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're going to increase our paving budget. It is increased for this year. We hope to maybe tackle some more depending on inflation. We haven't done that yet, but we're trying to get at the roads that are concerned. We have a road tour scheduled for May 6th with the town board. If there's somebody has a concern about a road, wherever, please call the town clerk and we'll make sure that we take a look at it and see if there's anything we can do. I wanted to also announce that we reached a new agreement with Sevastopol school districts on the use of our park. They basically have designated the town park as their home fields for their baseball, softball teams. We are in the process of sharing expenses on projects such as improving and repairing the baseball field in particular, which seems to feel it's a swamp. We're going to raise that up and dry that out so it can be used more. We're in the process of replacing dugouts and bullpens and doing other enhancements, which hopefully we will accomplish this year, and that's where some of the money that is in the general fund and others is designated to go. Last year, we implemented a short-term rental ordinance, which deals with the explosive growth of short-term rentals in your neighborhoods and near your homes. And if you hadn't heard all the statistics, the one thing I'll leave you with is that there were, I forget the year, I want to say 5 years ago, and Hugh probably can tell me exactly, we had 400 short-term rentals. Last year we had 1,200, not in our town, in the county. Our town had 75, I believe is the number. So it's a problem that we addressed, and I'm pleased to say that although we led the charge with a lot of heat at different times, it appears that most of the other towns in the county have either implemented or are about to implement some version of our ordinance, trying to deal with this issue. It's a positive from many perspectives, but it can be a negative if it's not addressed correctly, and we think we've done that for you. I want to thank Linda Waite and Hugh Zettel, and the other Plan Commission members who spent a lot of time developing, working, researching, and making sure that we made the right decision on that project. Okay. Also, in our quest to improve the surroundings in your community, we've made a concerted effort to deal with buildings that are dilapidated, falling into themselves, whatever category you'd like to put them in. We have taken down the Muscat property, which is the properties across from the mill. We did that 2 years ago. I'm happy to report that the DNR has the owner has dealt with the contamination from the underground fuel tanks, and those have been pulled from that property, and the land has been decontaminated and is most recently put up for sale and was sold. And so there is a developer working now with the town, trying to decide where we're going to go, where he's going to go with that property. And of course, you've probably seen in the Pulse, we're also working with the DOT to try and maintain reasonable road access on 4257 at that particular point in time, as well as at some point in time, Gordon Road, with the problem of turning to the north off of that down by Culver's. We've also had 2 mobile homes that we've had taken down this year that needed attention for a long, long time. And there's a single-family home that's also coming down near the town, and another one in the works. So we're going to continue to make investments to try and remove those eyesores from your community, which I think there's people that certainly appreciate it, that live nearby them or drive by them on a regular basis. So I think we're pretty much done, other than we've talked about broadband. We'll obviously keep you in the loop as we move forward with that. And I think we have one other thing that Linda wanted to share. You had
yes.
something that I guess you could call a significant achievement.
Credits to our clerk. I mentioned this at our town board meeting last night, that when I came to vote on April 5th, how pleasant and helpful our election inspectors were, dealing with new district maps and some boundary changes and all that. And then Amy received this very nice note from the League of Women Voters. It says, "Dear Amy, thank you for all you do to make our elections fair, safe, and accessible. I appreciate you and the dedicated members of the community who serve as local election officials and poll workers. You make democracy happen, even under extreme pressure this year. You are an election hero. Thank you." And then again, that is from the League of Women Voters. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Well deserved. Thank you.
All right, a couple topics. I don't know if there's anything anyone would like to add to this evening, but any future needs or projects or anything from the floor that you'd like us to look at, consider, ignore, anything? All right. You know, you can always come to us anytime at any of our town board meetings or call our clerk treasurer. She'll document it and bring it to us. I assume there's no written resolutions from the floor on anything? All right, hearing none. Couple announcements. 2022 open book. This is your opportunity to take a look at your property tax bill. Friday, June 24th at 10 a.m. And that will be here at the town hall, correct?
Correct, here in person.
So it will not be virtual like it was last year, so there will be here, you can talk directly to the assessor. The Board of Review follows on Tuesday, July 26th at 1 o'clock, so if you're not satisfied with where you are with the appraisal of the open book, you have the option of appearing before the Board of Review. So I think that is everything. What we would do next is adjourn our annual meeting tonight to April 18th of 2023, which is the third Tuesday in April.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further business, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Motion by Laddie, second by?
Second.
Second by Dale. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Nice seeing you.